Hello to you, Mr. Ilan Mor. It's a pleasure to host you on our podcast, World Israel Beytenu podcast, that we're talking about a lot of issues that we have problems with them in the world. But before we get to the problems, first of all, tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to be a guest on your podcast, on your YouTube channel. My name is Ilan Mor. I'm a retired ambassador after 40 years of diplomatic service for the Israeli government. I joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1983, and since then, until 2022, I served in five continents. But the main point was Europe. I served in Africa, I served in Los Angeles, I served 9 years altogether in Germany, and then in China in between. And then
Interesting places, yeah, Los Angeles, China, Europe. You saw all the world.
that's exactly how the Marines slogan is: join the Marines or join the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and see the world. And actually, I did. So I did see the world. As I said, China, Germany twice, as a junior diplomat in Bonn before the transfer of the German capital from Bonn to Berlin, and then as deputy ambassador in Berlin before this deputy ambassador in China, and then ambassador in Hungary, and my last post was until 2022 ambassador of Israel to Croatia. So my specialty, so to speak, is Europe, European Union, and the relations between Israel and the European Union, which are very interesting, complicated. Sometimes it's a love-hate relations, and I'm sure that during our conversation we'll touch upon also this
Of
issue.
course. But you're talking about your, let's say, work as a diplomat, all your countries that you visited. But before that, your perfect work that I'm sure you did. Why did you go to diplomacy? What is diplomacy for you?
That's a very good question. When I applied to become a cadet at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs 40 years ago, the main way to become an Israeli diplomat is through a cadet course, and there are thousands of applications, and I was fortunate enough to be one of 20, 30 who were accepted after a long kind of a via dolorosa
Yeah.
away until you reach the point in which you are being told, yes, you are selected and you can become a cadet for 2 years at the ministry in Jerusalem. I was asked, why do you want to become an Israeli diplomat? And I think I remember my answer was quite straightforward. I was at the army. I served as a soldier in the service of my country. Now I would like to continue my service to the country as a soldier without uniform at the diplomatic front. At that time, at the middle of the 80s, the first Intifada was around the corner, and the relations with the Palestinians were as bad as they are today. And I thought that this is about time for me to continue my service to the country in a different way, on a different front. And that's why I decided to join the ministry, and I was very happy to be accepted. And I think my long service for Israel was a successful one.
That is amazing. That the person that served for Israel for not a little, time, for some years, comes to the Israeli ministry, foreign ministry, and says, "I want to continue my service." And not every person can do that thing, and it's not easy. And for that, I want to tell you, thank you from my heart. But you had a lot of challenges back then, and of course, we have challenges today. Let's say, from the point of view, what were the challenges in diplomacy that you saw, let's say before the 7th of October, that of course we had this awful massacre, this awful war that is happening in Israel right now, after the 7th of October. And of course everything changed. All the diplomacy, maybe a lot of things changed, and you're going to tell us about that. Your opinion, of course. And just tell us about what were your challenges as a diplomat.
as a streamline, as a line or a silver line, which went through my whole career, was the fight for the legitimacy of the state of Israel. Um, Not very many people, not very many countries understand the need of Israel to become a legitimate country in the family of nations in the world. And one of my challenges was, together with my colleagues all over the world, is to fight for our legitimacy, because there are still a majority of people in the world and a majority of countries, I'm talking about Muslim countries and Arab countries, who do not recognize as a legitimate entity of the Jewish people, the homeland of the Jewish people in the land of our forefathers. This was one of the main challenge which continues until today, even after, and it became even more
Difficult.
difficult after the 7th of October.
And I just want to stop you here because it's very strange. If we were already talking about the 7th of October, how after this kind of massacre, there's more difficulty of legitimacy of our country?
Well, that's the downside of being the only Jewish state, the only Jewish country in the world. We are a minority, a single state living in the Middle East, surrounded by unfriendly countries. Even though we have peace agreement with most of our neighbors, still they do not recognize that Israel has the right to exist as a sovereign state. The idea is that we have to continue this struggle for to get the legitimacy, even though Israel is a success story. I always, when I gave public lectures all over the world, from Los Angeles even to Africa, in Africa, and not to mention in China, I was talking about Israel as a miracle, which has been established against all odds and has prospered for the last 76 years and become a member of the family of nations. And not only this, we are helping the world to become a better one by implementing the idea, the principle of tikkun olam, making the world better.
Yeah.
See what we are doing in Africa, or what we have been doing in Africa, in other developing countries, in South America and Asia.
Can you give one example about Africa? Because I guess that our people that are listening to us don't know all the projects
Sure.
or all the help that Israel is actually giving other countries.
I was sent as a very junior ambassador, diplomat to Africa, to Liberia in 1986 with my family, with my two, at that time they were babies, two children, to Monrovia, which is the capital of Liberia in West Africa. And the main job that I had is to arrange for local people to be sent to Israel to be trained in agriculture, in medicine, in community development in Israel, to get the knowledge from us and to come back to to Liberia and to implement it for the benefit of their own people. We Israel, through the International Development Department of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we send experts, doctors, experts in agriculture, in water usage, etc., to Liberia in order to help the local people to improve their abilities to make a better use of water and agriculture, and to treat them. One of my best friends until today, it is almost 40 years, is an ENT doctor, ears, nose, and throat doctor from Hadassah Medical Center, who was sent also with his family to Liberia to help the local people, to assist them, to cure them. So, and this is one story among many, many, many stories which you can see all over the world. Israeli experts helping the people help themselves to have a better living condition. And this is based on the idea of Golda Meir, who was not only the Prime Minister of Israel, she was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who in the 60s already went on a tour to Africa. 1 month, she toured many developing countries in Africa and offered our assistance, which was accepted. Yes, there was a political reason behind it, to get the support of those people, those countries in the United Nations, because even today we are isolated and we cannot do anything against the automatic majority of the Muslims and the Arab and the non-alignment groups in the General Assembly of the United Nations. But nevertheless, we did it because we are Jewish, because we believe in the principle of tikkun olam, and the fact that we are successful, we don't want to keep it to ourselves. We want to share it with other countries, and this is what we have been doing ever since.
I'm talking now not only as a Israeli citizen, but I'm talking as a person that hears you, and I'm so happy that we have a country like this in the world. And then we're talking about, the light against the dark with all the world. And then we're going back to 86, and we're talking about the challenges. And when you did all what you did and you tried to help this country, what were your challenges, and how did that country see us after your work there?
Well, our work, the diplomatic work, is a kind of a relay run in the Olympic Games.
Yeah.
You bring the torch, you get the torch from your predecessor, and then you bring it to your successor. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon of working hard, trying to persuade, presenting the facts, trying to make friends with personal friends with the local people, try to get to the highest position of the politics in these countries, and you have to do asbara. You have to explain. At that time, we didn't have the social media, so in a way, our work was easier. Nowadays, it's totally different, and I'm sure we'll talk about it.
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
And so you cannot measure success stories as such, because it's a kind of a cumulative work, and you see the end, at least at the United Nations, at the other international organizations where people support your position. Again, it's not a one-man show, it's a group, it's a teamwork from all the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, all the diplomats on different levels, which until the 7th of October did a great job. It's not to say that after the 7th of October they are not doing a great job. On the contrary, I follow what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is doing especially on social media. It's great work. Great work. You cannot see success stories as such, because, as I said, they have to be together in order to see the impact of it. But to blame the Asbara for not working, I think it's a mistake.
So we're talking now, and I understand that we stand against the same challenges that were before the 7th of October and after the 7th of October, and you're talking about all the challenges through 40 years of your work.
There is a big change.
Where did we fail?
There is a big change. I was talking just a couple of minutes ago about the legitimacy of the State of Israel. It was not that problematic before the 7th of October. I would say before the 2000s. We had to work, we have to explain, we had to persuade. We presented all the issues, all the historical facts, all the political facts. But what made a change is what I call and of course, before I touch upon this big difference,
yes.
Anti-Semitism was all over. You didn't find anti-Semitism in Africa. You didn't find anti-Semitism in China. China has changed from my time, in 1998 to 2002 to today. Maybe you would like to talk about these two later. But you find anti-Semitism in Germany. I spent 9 years in this country. I know the language, I know the culture. I spent 5 years in Hungary. The story of the Jewish community in Hungary during the Holocaust, during the Shoah is quite famous. Not as famous as it should be, because not very many people know what happened in 3 months in 1944, but it's a different story.
It's a different story.
And also in Croatia. But now, since the 2000s, since the second Intifada, this is a threshold in which we have notified, and it was Natan Sharansky who put the finger on the problem and talked about the new anti-Semitism. Nathan Sharansky was talking about the new anti-Semitism, which is basically based on the attempts to delegitimize Israel, to equate Israel with the apartheid regime in South Africa.
Yes.
He was talking about delegitimization of Israel. He was talking about the sanctions about Israel. He actually was talking about what we now today know as the BDS.
Yes.
He was the first one to talk about it, and this has been since today. This has been the main challenge of all Israelis. I'm not talking only about the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Every Israeli should fight against the idea of the BDS. These organizations, in the pretext of protecting the Palestinians,
Yeah.
they are calling actually for the destruction of the State of Israel as a political entity. They equate Israel to apartheid, and they're talking about sanctions, they're talking about boycott, and they're talking about the investment, taking out this investment from Israel. And unfortunately, what we see is more and more people, especially in the United States, see what's going on in the universities over there and also in Europe. And more people support the idea, and and the problem is that the younger generation believes that Israel is a kind of a complot. It's a kind of a creation of the cooperation of two colonial sides,
Yes.
the Americans and the Europeans. And this is the danger. What I see. I'm not talking about the military danger, which is a challenge by itself.
Yes.
I'm talking about the idea that Israel, which has been a success story, a miracle, as I said, has become a pariah state. We are isolated because of those people. Of course, because of our policy. Now I can criticize the policy of the State of Israel right now. But we are isolated, and the number of friends who support us is
Getting less and less.
Unfortunately, you're right. And this is the main challenge, to talk and to defend and to persuade and to make sure that Israel will not become a pariah state, will not become isolated, will not become under sanctions. But unfortunately, the policies of all governments of Israel are moving the ships, so to speak, toward the direction of more sanctions. See what's going on in the International Court of Justice in The Hague and the Criminal Court of Justice in The Hague, the two separate
Yes.
courts. This is the first time in the history that a democratic country is being judged or summoned
Yes.
to the court for crimes against humanity. Unheard of.
That is very hard to hear what you're all saying, but of course, I want to continue to the next question, that is talking about what are the let's say we were talking about the challenges in diplomacy, right? But now I want to talk about the challenges of being Jewish abroad. But because you served the country for 40 years, well, I'm not talking about the army, right? But you served as a Jew abroad and as Israeli. What are the challenges? Are they the same, or people see you differently when you say that you're Jewish or Israeli?
No. People do not differentiate. They make their life very easy. Israel is Jewish. The Jewish diaspora or the Jewish community and the Jewish community are Israel. They are not, as I said, they are not differentiated between the one. And you know what? All the Israeli government from the very beginning, from 1948, has declared themselves as a Jew. We were established as a Jewish state,
yeah.
and we declare that we are, as the only Jewish state in the world, we are responsible for every Jew all over the world.
Yeah.
And look what happened with the Jews out of Ethiopia, the Soviet Jewry in the 70s and the 80s. And every Jewish person who is in a situation which needs our help is being served by Israel, either directly or indirectly with friendly countries. So we are responsible for every Jewish community in the world. And me, as a representative of the State of Israel, I felt that this is my duty also to take care of the Jewish community. I was them, together with them, I stand with them in Hungary or in other places against anti-Semitism. When I served in Hungary, I was very vocal against anti-Semitic statements and activities. Sometimes I was afraid that I'm crossing a line here. After all, I'm not a citizen of that country or other
Yes.
country, but I took it upon myself as something which you take for granted. The Israeli ambassador or the Israeli representative is also the representative of the Jewish community, and when they had problems of community things. Um, they came to me and I tried to help without crossing lines.
Of
After all,
course.
as I said, I'm a guest to help them as much as I could. And
And
in Hungary, fighting against anti-Semitism with the Jewish community was sometimes very, very hard
challenging.
and sometimes also successful, without going into details now.
Of course. And you know, after we see the 7th of October, and after we see the war that happened between Russia and Ukraine, we can see that all the Jews around the world are actually seeking and looking for their home in Israel as a Jewish community.
That's something which I take it for granted, of course. Um, Before the 7th of October, I was sure, without any hesitation, that Israel is the real, the only guarantee for the safety and security of the Jewish people all over the world. After the 7th of October, I have my doubts. I have my doubts because of the big blow that we got from Hamas on the 7th of October. They found us unprepared with a lot of mistakes that were done. Politics also was not the right one in order to protect us. For the first time in the history of Israel, part of the territory of Israel was occupied by foreign forces. 24 hours,
Yes.
the terrorists were part of
Otefaza.
Otefaza.
The Gaza Strip, yes.
Yeah. So I have my doubts. On top of it was also the justice revolution, not reform, revolution, as I see it before. And you put all the things together, I'm sure that many Jews now think twice and are, thinking if really Israel is the only guarantee for their safety. They're raising anti-Semitism and anti-Israel and the new anti-Semitism, which is, as I explained, the delegitimization of Israel all over the world, is something that we as a Jewish state have to take very seriously. But the government has so many balls, so many issues in the air which the government has to tackle. I'm not sure that this issue is in the front line of their priorities.
We were talking about that when you were in the in 86 and when you did your service, you said one little phrase. We didn't have social media, it was a lot easier.
Yeah.
Now you understand what is my question. How does social media affect the problems that we have as a state, as a society, as Jewish people in the world?
Look, if you're not in the social media as a diplomat, as an embassy, as a political entity, even as a member of the Knesset, you are not there. Nobody really
knows you and sees you.
You are considered to be non-existent. Our activities, ever since the development of the social media, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Israel was among the very first ministries all over the world to recognize the problem, to recognize the challenge, and started to work very early on Facebook, and then on Instagram, and then of course on Twitter. And I also in Hungary, I had a very active Twitter account, Facebook, because if you are not there, you
cannot do Asbara as well.
People do not understand what is the work of the ambassador. So I was reporting from a visit to the countryside, to a meeting with the prime minister, etc., to show the activities of an Israeli ambassador and to get, I'm sorry to say, but the more likes you get, the better.
Of course.
The run for the likes sometimes
It's crazy.
it's crazy, but
There's nothing you can do.
that's the new rules of the game nowadays. And I must tell you, really, I follow the work of my former colleagues on the various social media. I don't have Instagram, I don't have Facebook, but what I see on Twitter and the position papers that they supply our 100 and something embassies and general consulate all over the world is priceless, really priceless. And we have to acknowledge and say a big thank you to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and my former colleagues all over the world who are doing a very, very important work. Nobody knows the value of the work, what they do, but definitely they contribute to the fight against the new anti-Semitism, against this attempt to delegitimize Israel, and they're doing a great job. Coming back to your question, if you don't have social media, forget about it. You can do something else, but even the army is using the social
course.
media for its...
And they're doing a great job. They're doing a very good job.
All right.
But then I'm asking myself the next question. So why are we losing Hasbara after the 7th of October? Or maybe we were failing it even before the 7th of October and no one even realized it.
No, that's the wrong question. I was anticipating this question and I have an answer. Hasbara means to explain a policy. But when a priori the policy is bad, then even the best Hasbara cannot explain it. And what do I mean? I will give you an example. Israel has been occupying the West Bank since 1967. The West Bank. I'm not talking about Gaza, and I'm not talking about the Golan Heights. The Golan Heights is part of Israel, was annexed by the government and was recognized, and this is not the story. The story is the West Bank, Judea and Samaria,
Yes.
Yehuda v'Shomron. And ever since 1967, we are holding the control in the area through the Israeli army and we tell the world we are waiting for a partner in order to find the solution for the situation through negotiation. We don't have any partner, we say. So the occupation continues. But in the international law, occupation is not a bad word. The international law can recognize occupation while it is temporary. By the activities of the Israeli government, annexation, building new settlements, etc., what we see now in the relation between the Na'arei Agvaot and the Palestinians there, the civilians, gives a signal to the world that this occupation, this situation is not temporary, it's becoming a permanent one.
Yes.
And when the international law sees that the occupation becomes a permanent one, this is a different story. So we are running toward a situation in which the world will say Israel's presence in the West Bank is not temporary, it is permanent, and from this, and because of this is illegal.
Yes.
It's illegal presence there, and if Israel does not go out, there are sanctions.
Of course.
There are boycotts. There are other instruments in the international law in order to punish those who continue the presence of Israel there and makes the presence a permanent one. So we can no longer say we are still waiting for a Palestinian partner, which does not exist, maybe in the future, but and the world sees that the situation is what it is, and many people, and you see the numbers are growing. Many countries recognize the state of Palestine, even though there is no state of Palestine. It's an artificial entity, but Spain and Belgium and others are recognizing the state of Palestine. The Palestinians are getting more rights in the United Nations and the international organization, and this the best Hasbara cannot explain, because the international law is the silver line, the motto, the basis of the Western society, which Israel part of. We cannot be, we cannot claim that we are part of the Western society, the so-called Enlightenment
Yeah.
society, and behave like we were, alone in the world and do whatever we do regarding the Palestinians. It does not go hand in hand. So this situation, even the best orator, presenter cannot explain, because this is the international law. These are the rules based on the history experience of the First and the Second World War,
Yes.
which we paid, everyone, including the Jewish people, paid a heavy price for. And this is the rules of the game nowadays: international law, human rights, equality, etc., etc. We have to decide. Israel has to decide a strategic decision whether to continue to be part of the Western world. And if this is the direction we would like to choose, we have to start acting like this. Respect international law, the values and the norms of the West, which is respect for human rights, tolerance, taking care of the minorities, etc., etc. Or to be a third world country which believes that we are the center of the world, we are alone in the world, and we don't care about the rest. I'm sure that the first choice is the best one, and I hope that after we get rid of this current government, we will have a leadership which will take us to this toward this direction,
To a
uh,
new path.
to to a renew path of way of living as part of the world, as part of the Western world, part of the globalization, contributing to the world, and not to continue to live on our swords with terrorism and war, and without any prospect for the coming generation. I have two grandchildren. I don't know what is the legacy that we are going to give them once we are not around anymore. So this is the crucial point, which I see the situation nowadays.
And when we're talking about globalization, and we're talking about the challenges that we have, and we're talking about the Western world, right? But I do want to touch the point that you talked about China. And I guess that the years that you were in China in the, let's say, in the beginning of the 2000s, and China that we see today is two different countries.
It's a big difference. It's a
And
big difference.
what is the difference?
When I came to China in 1988 until 2002, you could feel a little bit of more of kind of relaxation in the involvement of the Communist Party in the private life of the people. People were more free. They started to visit the world, not as individuals, but in groups, but still. They continued the opening policy of Mao Zedong to be part of the world. Nowadays, is the situation totally different. China nowadays has become a full-fledged dictatorship with a leader, Xi Jinping, who has nominated himself, changed the constitution and the constitution of the Communist Party, and became a leader for life. And he has a clear-cut policy of making China a world power in every aspect of you can think of, be it on the military aspect, be it on the cultural aspect, be it on the political aspect, and be it on the ideological aspect. China now has positioned itself as a big challenge to the United States and to the Western world, because China offers an alternative to the Western society, Western political system, and many countries are following because of the Chinese power and money. China is very active in economic projects. The Belt and the Road Initiative of Xi Jinping has brought many countries as supporters to this initiative. China is trying to also to have a stronghold in the heart of Europe. In Israel, China is very present,
And
not
active.
only the electric cars, but also in building projects. China supports Russia in its war against the Ukraine. China supports Iran. China supports Saudi Arabia. China is trying to position itself also in the Middle East as a deal breaker between Saudi Arabia and Iran. To make it, and not to mention, of course, the tension around the Strait of Taiwan, which is boiling for many years now. And when there is a war around Taiwan between China and the United States, then we have a problem. As we say, Houston, the
We have,
world,
yeah.
we have a problem. So all in all, what we see is a very aggressive, assertive policy of China by its leader toward the world. And as far as Israel is concerned, China, I think, is not a friend of Israel. China supports Hamas from the very beginning, never criticized Hamas or atrocities against Israel on the 7th of October. And its policy is, of course, supporting our majority, supporting the Palestinian state, of course, which is not new, but it continues from the 70s and the 60s. So all in all, I don't believe that China is a friend of Israel nowadays.
And now we're talking about שנייה. אני חייב לבדוק שזה מצלם לפחות.
תבדוק.
אנחנו על זה.
אצלי זה בסדר.
And after we had such a great podcast, and we talked about so many challenges, and we talked about the globalization, and we talked about our nation as a whole. How do you see the future in diplomacy?
Well, diplomacy is irreplaceable. Diplomats will continue to do the job, the hard job on the ground, like the boots on the ground for every country. Also, the Israeli diplomats will continue to do the job because they are irreplaceable. If they don't do it, who will do it? It means that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs must get more budget, bigger budget, big support, political support from the leaders. I think in the last 15, 20 years, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was hurt by cutting budgets, and we couldn't do more than we did. And what we did with the limited budget that we had, it's a miracle by itself. So diplomacy will continue, even though leaders can, pick up the phone, the iPhone, the smartphone, and talk directly to each other. The diplomats are irreplaceable, especially when we talk about the work on the social media, when we talk about the Asbara activities. For Israel, it's crucial. Of course, it doesn't end with Asbara. It begins with a logic, reasonable policy, which is not against the world, but playing with the world, not on the expenses on the security needs of Israel. This is something which is a given. The security needs of Israel are the basic elements for every politics. See the 7th of October.
Of course.
How I see the situation in Israel, as I said before, we need to replace this government. This government must go. From the top, he is the leader, he is responsible. Down, the military and the politics, and of course the internal security, Shabak, everyone should go. And I hope, even though I see that also in the issue of leadership we have a crisis, I don't see on the horizon real leaders who can take Israel from the lowest points that we reached and bring them out. There are some, and I hope they will be elected. אני יכול להגיד ליברמן? I believe that Yvette Lieberman, Victor Lieberman, is one of them who can, together with others, create a new government which will take us to a different direction, to a promising direction, and give some hope to this country, especially after the 7th of October. Don't forget, dear viewers, our national anthem, Atikva, and the first line of our national anthem, which is Od lo avda tikvatenu. We have never lost our hope. And I think this is a leitmotif for all of us. We have never lost our hope. And in a way, I'm optimistic. Even though I learned, coming from the Middle East, I I learned to become very realistic. But here I have a small rhyme of hope that we can change, turn around the situation and make it better.
As a young man, you taught me and our viewers a lot of things, a lot of information that we all need to think about. And of course, you let me stay optimistic as well and hope for better days. And I want to tell thank you to Ilan Mor for being at our podcast. And I hope you to continue coming and listening to our podcast for new information, for new news, and for new people that can only teach us about life. Thank you
My
thank you
pleasure.
to Ilan Mor. Thank you
My
so much.
pleasure. Thank you.